You have to say hi to the camera.
Hello, camera.
Hi to the camera.
I did an MA, a master's degree at Goldsmiths, and the sort of main thesis of that was a collection of poems about home, poems from home, poems about home. And that was when I first started pulling all these poems together. And I had started writing at various times in the last few years and started fashioning them and making them into something and, you know, forming them into poems for the thesis, for the master's. And out of that came the idea to do the book, which I started working on and trying to get a series of poems to fit this book about home and about the memory of home. And out of that came the album. So it's a gradual process. Some of the poems are about 5 years old, but it takes about 5 years to write a book, to put a really good tight book together and to get all the poems tight. You know, I'm one of these people that like to recraft and edit and edit and edit and edit until it's in print. Then I stop. But before that, I work a lot. For me personally, is the church, the spiritual Baptist church, what you could call voodoo, the voodoo church or whatever. The sort of rhythm of the church, the sort of that rhythm that I grew up with in Trinidad. That's the root of it. And then on top of that, you know, because I'm Trinidadian, I'm influenced by calypso and a lot of Trinidadian music, and that comes into it. I mean, my whole idea was to move away from just trying to play rock music or something that was foreign to me to something that was really me. That was an expression of where I came from, to be true to myself. You know? So that's why I got the Baptist music in there, the calypso, and then I got different musicians brought different things. You know, one musician brought a jazz element, one brought a deeper funk element. You know, you blend it all together, and then you have us. You know.
My home is in the mountain top. It's just a three-sided box with the front wide open up to the blackbirds and the kiskadee.
The ones that came before were probably, you know, the music at least was much more spontaneous and it was created more on the spot. Even though we had ideas from before, we came together as musicians with Anthony and we created it in more spontaneously. This one has elements of that also, but the music is more thought out in advance and we work the stuff before recording it.
Is really for a friend of mine that passed away really suddenly last year. He died about a year. He died the year before, I believe. The year before last. He died in 2007. A friend of mine who was younger than me and who just died suddenly. And I kind of dedicate that song to him. But saying that, it's more about, for me, it's about growing up. It's about being a child in Trinidad and growing up. And where I lived I lived with my grandparents, and the back of the house was this big piece of land where I could go and climb trees and do anything I wanted. And it's really about that experience, the jungle behind the house, this jungle that was there. And I'm saying that the jungle, the trees know me, they know my name, all these insects and all these animals, they know who I am, you know. And it's really about that. But the blues feeling, the feeling behind it is a blues and a sadness. That's for my friend.
For the hourglass of ride.
This is for my father, something I wrote for my dad. Yeah, it's very simple. It's a simple story. My dad, I never grew up with my dad. I lived with my grandparents. My dad and my mom split up when I was about 1. And my dad went off to Tobago to live, which is the island next to Trinidad. And I didn't see him very often. I saw him like once a year. He would come, bring a present, and then he would go again. But he always came, when he came, he was always a dude. He was always like we would call a dandy, you know, slick, really well dressed, nice cars, woman, the works, money, you know. And then that kept happening for about 10 years. I'd see him once a year, once every 2 years. And then all of a sudden, one day he came back for good. But when he came back, he was poor. He didn't have anything. He was starting all over again. And it was a very sad experience to see that, you know, what he'd come to after the myth of him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's why I say in the piece, the myth of him. He was a legend in the 70s, and then come the 80s, he was in his middle ages, but he was poor and, you know, still handsome, but poor. You know, so that piece is really for him. The conductors of his mystery are his fingers, his hands, because his hands are very charismatic, and he's a preacher as well. He uses his hands a lot. And he's a carpenter as well. He makes things with his hands. So his hands were the sweet conductors of his mystery, you know.
You know, he kind of grew ambitious with wood in his middle ages. And that night I spent there with the cicadas in that clear sky. Even though each room was still unfinished and each sadness was hidden, man, I would have stayed right there with my father if he had asked.
The history of that is a few days before we recorded the album, we were in Paris. We were in a studio. Antoine's, he's got a friend called Professor Lesab. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But he's got a studio in, actually I won't even try to pronounce the name.
Somewhere in Paris?
Somewhere in central Paris.
Right.
And we were there just hanging out, and he started playing this rhythm track and asked us to jam along with it, and recorded it. And you know, he does a lot of recording, spontaneous stuff. So it was just a jam that started there, and I had some lyrics that were actually not in this book, they're from the next book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're very surreal, very strange lyrics, and I put it to there, the stuff that I was doing, and then the band and improvised on it. So then we thought, you know, this sounds okay. And then we came to record, and we just threw it in as a jam in the recording session, and it worked. It's amazing how things that are very spontaneous tend to work the best.
Snail messengers from tobacco gardens bring thunder to the land of the south. Legba in this palanquin with 10,000 earthquakes and a plague of ants, with the drum of moon, an Ethiopian heart.
Well, thank you very much for your time and your kindness. Bye.
And eyes in the euphorbia tree